Before we get into tonight's files, I want to say something. Every story you are about to hear was submitted to the archives by real people. These are not written by authors. These are not adapted from fiction. These are accounts from ordinary people who walked into something they were never supposed to find and somehow made it back to tell us what happened. I'll let them speak for themselves. I work nights at a distribution warehouse on the edge of the city. It is one of those enormous buildings, the kind where you can stand at one end and barely see the other. The kind where sounds travel strangely, where a forklift beeping 200 feet away sounds like it is right next to you. I had been working there for about 3 years before any of this happened. I knew that building, or at least I thought I did. The incident happened on a Tuesday in late November. The overnight crew had already clocked out early because of a heating system malfunction. I stayed behind because I had misplaced my car keys somewhere in the back section and I needed to find them before I could leave. My supervisor told me to lock up when I was done and left me alone in the building. I want to be clear about the size of this place. It is over 400,000 square feet of floor space. When the lights in a section are off, it is not just dark. It is the kind of dark that makes your eyes start lying to you. I was searching through the back storage section when the motion sensor lights clicked off. I had been standing still too long. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight and realized I had left it charging at my workstation on the other side of the building. So I started walking back through the dark, using the faint orange glow of the emergency exit signs to navigate. And that is when I heard it. A hum, low and constant, coming from somewhere to my left in a section of the warehouse I had never worked in. It was not mechanical. I had spent 3 years listening to the machines in that building, the compressors, the conveyor motors, the HVAC units. This was not any of them. It was softer, almost like the building itself was breathing out a single sustained note. I told myself it was probably just a refrigeration unit in the cold storage room and kept walking. Then I noticed the floor. The linoleum tiles beneath my feet, the standard industrial gray ones that covered the entire warehouse floor, had changed. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could feel the difference under my boots. They were softer, and in the dim glow of an exit sign up ahead, I could see that they were a pale, yellowish color. Not gray, yellow. Old, faded yellow, like something from an office building in the 70s. I stopped walking. I turned around slowly. Behind me, as far as I could see in the dim light, the floor was the same faded yellow. The industrial shelving units were gone. The walls were closer than they should have been, and they were covered in some kind of textured wallpaper, the same dull yellow beige. The ceiling above me was low, far lower than the 50-foot warehouse ceiling I knew, and inset with rows of fluorescent lights, although only about half of them were on, flickering slightly, giving everything an uneven, sickly glow. I am not someone who panics. I want to make that clear. I'm 6'2", 220 pounds. I've worked night shifts alone for years, but standing in that hallway, because it was a hallway, not a warehouse, and I have no explanation for how it got there or how I got into it, I felt a fear that I cannot properly describe. It was not the fear of something jumping out at me. It was quieter than that. It was the fear of wrongness, the deep animal certainty that I was somewhere I was not supposed to be, somewhere outside the normal edges of the world. The hum was louder now, and I could smell something, a faint, damp, warm smell, like old carpet and stale air, like a basement that had been sealed for 20 years. I did not move for what felt like a very long time. Then I started walking, not back the way I came, because the way I came was gone. There was just more hallway. Forward, because that was the only option. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Some of them clicked off as I passed beneath them and did not come back on. The hallway turned left, then right, then opened into a wider room. More yellow walls, more low ceiling, more flickering lights. No doors, no windows, no way to tell how large the space actually was, because the light only reached so far before giving way to shadow. The hum was everywhere now. Not louder exactly, but all around, like tinnitus, like it was coming from inside my head. I kept moving. I do not know for how long. It felt like an hour. It might have been 10 minutes. And then the tiles changed again. Gray, industrial gray linoleum under my boots. The ceiling shot upward. The walls disappeared. I was standing in the back storage section of my warehouse, the motion sensor lights clicking on one by one as they detected me, the familiar smell of cardboard and diesel in the air. My keys were on the floor next to a shelving unit, right where I must have dropped them. I have never told my supervisor about this. I do not know what I would say. I went back to that section the next day during my shift, and the floor was gray, the walls with a standard corrugated metal. There was no hallway, no hum. But sometimes, when I'm working late and I stand still too long and the motion sensor lights click off, I hear it, just for a second, low and constant, coming from somewhere to my left. And I start walking immediately. I know how this sounds. I have told this story 3 times now, once to my flatmate, once to my therapist, and once to a forum online that I have since deleted my account from because of how people responded. I am not looking for anyone to believe me. I am putting this down because I think writing it out is the only way I am going to stop dreaming about it. This happened 14 months ago. I was 24. I was doing a late-night grocery run at the large supermarket near my flat, the one that stays open until 2 in the morning. It was just past midnight. The store was almost empty. Maybe 4 or 5 other customers scattered through the aisles, one bored teenager staffing a self-checkout machine. I needed to get to the international foods aisle, which was in the very back of the store. I cut through the household goods section, which is in the middle of the building and always feels slightly abandoned even during normal hours. Something about the low foot traffic there, the way sound dies in all the plastic and packaging. I turned a corner between a display of mops and a wall of cleaning products and walked through a gap between 2 shelving units. And then I was not in the supermarket anymore. It happened between one step and the next. I did not trip, did not fall, did not black out. One moment I was looking at a shelf of laundry detergent, and the next I was standing in a corridor. White walls, very slightly textured, the kind of cheap paneling you see in old office parks. A drop ceiling with fluorescent tube lights above, most of them functional, but one about 30 feet ahead, strobing slowly. The floor was a thin gray-blue carpet, the kind that exists in a million waiting rooms, and it was just slightly damp underfoot, not soaked, just enough that the dampness came through my shoes. The smell hit me immediately, something between wet concrete and old upholstery. Not a horrible smell, just deeply fundamentally wrong, the smell of a place that had not had fresh air in a long time. I turned around. Behind me was a plain white wall, no gap between shelving units, no supermarket, just wall. I stood there for a moment. My brain was trying very hard to construct an explanation and failing. I am a practical person. I study engineering. I believe in causes and effects, in physical laws, in the idea that spaces are located within relation to other spaces and do not simply swap out when you walk through them. I could feel my mind straining against what my eyes were showing me. I started walking forward because there was nothing else to do. The corridor stretched ahead for what seemed like a very long way. Doors occasionally appeared on either side, plain white doors with no labels, no handles, just flat panels flush with the wall. I tried pushing on a few of them. None of them moved. The corridor turned and turned again and branched, and I started trying to remember my turns the way you do in a maze, left, right, left, knowing even as I did it that the information was probably useless. I want to describe something that is hard to put into words, which is the quality of the silence in that place. It was not quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. My footsteps pressed sound into the carpet. But there was something underneath the ordinary sounds, something like the total absence of anything outside. In a normal building, you always have background noise leaking in from the world, traffic, wind, the distant sound of other human activity. In that corridor, there was nothing, just the hum and my breathing and the soft sound of my shoes on the damp carpet. It made everything feel provisional, like the sounds I was making were the only sounds that had ever existed in that space. I do not know how long I walked. Time was difficult in there. At some point, I sat down against one of the walls because my legs were shaking. I was not crying. I was past the point of crying. I was just very still, listening to the fluorescent lights, trying to figure out if the strobing one up ahead was getting closer or if I had imagined moving. Then something changed. The carpet under my left hand was no longer damp. I looked down. It was dry, and it was a different color, more blue-gray. And then my left hand was on cold linoleum, not carpet. And then both hands, and I looked up, and I was sitting on the floor of the supermarket in the household goods aisle, my back against a shelf of cleaning products. The bored teenager from the self-checkout was standing about 10 feet away, staring at me. He asked if I was all right. I told him I had slipped and felt dizzy. He seemed satisfied with this and walked away. I bought the groceries I had come for. I walked home. I did not sleep. I have not been back to that supermarket since. I have thought many times about whether what happened to me has an explanation, whether I had some kind of dissociative episode, whether I fainted and dreamed it, whether there is a rational story here that I am missing. I do not have an answer. What I know is that my shoes were still slightly damp when I got home, and there was a faint smell on my jacket, that same stale, wet concrete smell that took 3 washes to get out. I do not know what that place was, but it felt old, not abandoned, just old, like it had been there a very long time, quietly existing, and was not particularly surprised that I had shown up. I run a small electrical contracting business. Been doing it for 18 years. My work takes me into a lot of buildings that most people never see the inside of. Server rooms, sub-basements, plant rooms, old commercial properties that haven't been fully renovated since they were built in the 70s. I have been in hundreds of these spaces, thousands probably. I am not a man who gets unsettled easily. What happened to me was in a shopping centre in suburban Brisbane, not a large one of those older local centres with a supermarket and maybe 20 specialty shops, the kind that still has the original floor plan from when it opened in 1981. I had been called in to do some rewiring in the section of the building that sits behind the shops, the service corridor that runs along the back where the rubbish collection happens and the deliveries come in. I had been in this service corridor before. A few months earlier, I had done some work on the emergency lighting back there. It was a standard layout: concrete floor, breeze block walls painted cream, industrial lighting on the ceiling, doors every 10 meters or so, leading into the backs of the individual shops. Functional, ugly, nothing unusual. This time I was there at about 8 in the evening, after the shopping center had closed. My job was to check a section of the cable runs about halfway down the corridor. Someone had reported intermittent power drops in 3 of the shops, and the most likely cause was a damaged cable run in the service area. I had my tools, I had my plans, I had a key to the service entrance. Straightforward job. I went in through the service entrance at the eastern end. I walked maybe 60 meters down the corridor, found the cable run access panel I was looking for, opened it up, started doing my checks. Then I heard a door open behind me. I turned around. About 15 meters back, one of the shop access doors was open, propped ajar. The shops were supposed to be locked. I had checked the register of who had keys, and none of the tenants had access to the service corridor after hours. I walked back to have a look. Through the open door, I could see what should have been the back room of a clothing shop. Instead, I was looking into a room I did not recognize. Small, roughly square, walls covered in the same yellow-beige wallpaper that I have since been described on various internet forums dedicated to this phenomenon. Ceiling low, one overhead light, the old fluorescent kind, flickering. The smell, and this is the part I find hardest to talk about because of what came after, the smell was identical to my childhood. Specifically, it was identical to the smell of my primary school in the mid-90s. Some combination of the particular cleaning products they used, and old building materials, and the specific quality of air in an enclosed space full of small children. An extremely specific smell. My smell. Not a generic old building smell. Mine. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I stepped inside. The room was empty. No furniture, no fittings, just the walls and the floor and the light and the smell. Another door on the far side, identical to the one I had come through. I walked to it and opened it. Another room, same dimensions, same wallpaper, but in this one, standing in the center with its back to me, was a figure. I want to be accurate here because I know how this part sounds. The figure was adult height, wearing dark clothing. It was standing completely still, facing the far wall. I could see the back of its head, dark hair, roughly cut, the way you might cut your own hair if you did not have access to a mirror. Its hands were at its sides. I said, "Hello." My voice came out steady, which surprised me. The figure turned around. I am not going to describe the face in detail because I don't think I can do it accurately, and I don't want to sensationalize something that I am still genuinely trying to process. What I will say is this: it was a face, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth,
all in the right places, but the expression, if you can call it that, was not one that I have ever seen on a human face. It was not fear, not anger, not blankness. It was something that did not have a name, something between intense concentration and the total absence of recognition, like looking at someone who is looking at something that is not there.
We stood there looking at each other for what I believe was about 3 seconds. Then I walked backward through the door I had come through, pulled it shut, and walked back down the service corridor to the access panel I had been working on. I finished my checks. I found the damaged cable. I fixed it. I packed my tools, walked to the service entrance, locked it behind me, and sat in my van for 20 minutes before I felt ready to drive. I have not talked about the face publicly before. I have described the rooms, the smell, the layout. All of that I have shared in a few places online and got the expected mix of responses. But the face I kept back. The reason I am including it now is because of something that happened 4 months after that night. I was doing a job in a different suburb, different building entirely, and I was telling the story to my apprentice while we worked, the version without the face, just the rooms, the smell, the wallpaper. And my apprentice, who is 22 and grew up in New Zealand and had no reason to be connected to any of this, said, "Did you see anyone in there?" I stopped what I was doing. I asked him why he asked that. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Because I've been in one of those places, and there was someone standing in a room. I didn't look at the face. I didn't want to." We did not talk about it again after that. I do not know what the right question is here, or whether there is an answer. I do not know if what I saw was another person who had also clipped through somehow, or something that lived there, or a version of something I cannot explain. I only know it was standing in that room, and when I walked out, it stayed.